On the fateful morning of September 9, 2025, the world awoke to an unsettling reality. For the first time since the war, Germany, a NATO member, found itself accused of launching a direct strike on Russian territory. The shocking news erupted across airwaves and social media. Reports emerged claiming that Taurus missiles had been sent to storage facilities in western Ukraine. This revelation sent shockwaves through international communities and caused heated debates worldwide. Intelligence reports hinted that, in the final weeks of August, unusual activity had been detected at former military depots in Lviv, Ukraine. Satellite imagery coupled with intercepted communications unveiled convoys and equipment, which Russian sources quickly identified with codes linked to German defense supplies. At 5:45 a.m. local time, 2 Taurus missiles were reportedly launched from a Ukrainian airfield. Following their trajectory, the missiles skimmed low over the Sumy region before crossing the border into Russia, eventually hitting targets in Belgorod. The first explosion rocked the vicinity of a railway junction at approximately 6:12 a.m. Officially, the Russian Ministry of Defense stated that one missile was intercepted by air defense systems. However, the fragments and destruction suggested a catastrophic air detonation, damaging critical infrastructure. The second missile reportedly landed harmlessly in uninhabited land. In mere moments, these events were labeled by Russian officials as a red line crossed. Emergency statements from the highest echelons of government quickly followed, marking NATO's involvement as a looming threat. Within hours, the Russian military released footage showing strikes on targets in Ukraine, allegedly housing significant arsenals of cruise missiles. This bold operation was dubbed Lightning Response, utilizing Iskander tactical missile systems and other advanced weaponry, including Kinzhal hypersonic missiles and combat drones like the Kamikaze and Garin 2. Witnesses described scenes of fiery blasts and towering columns of smoke, with fires raging for more than a day. Reports claimed that a considerable amount of weaponry was destroyed, alongside the loss of foreign experts present at the site, figures that need independent verification. As news broke, evaluations of damages in various currencies differed widely. By the evening of that very day, an emergency parliamentary session convened in Berlin, where the future course of action was fervently debated. Should the government recognize the Russian Federation as an aggressor, or should they pursue diplomatic de-escalation? The stakes grew higher as, during the night, the situation escalated further. Reports surfaced of strikes targeting locations within Germany. In one notable instance, explosions erupted over an industrial area in Berlin, attributed to ballistic missiles armed with cluster munitions. This apparent display questioned the vulnerability of even the capital's districts and hinted at a readiness to intensify military actions. Internationally, diplomatic pressures mounted against key capitals and organizations to respond, condemning violations of international law. Meanwhile, humanitarian efforts began to assess damage to civilian infrastructure and organize aid for the affected population. As conflicting narratives emerged, both sides issued updates that sometimes contradicted each other. The need for verification and the involvement of independent observers became hotly debated topics among experts. On the economic front, signs of turmoil were already appearing, with heightened volatility in financial markets as companies re-evaluated their supply chains in the face of increasing tensions. The unfolding saga left an air of uncertainty. Reports and official statements continued to flow in, emphasizing the critical importance of dispelling confirmed facts from mere speculation. The coming days were bound to be shaped by reactions from international organizations and the media, seeking to provide verified accounts of the escalating situation. All eyes were on Europe, as the threat of conflict loomed larger. Tensions reached a boiling point on September 10, prompting urgent conversations between world leaders, each weighing their next move carefully. Would this day mark the ignition of a larger global conflict or the catalyst for negotiations? The clock was ticking as the world held its breath. The preceding events outlined the immediate aftermath of missile strikes that allegedly crossed a significant boundary. With one missile believed to have detonated mid-air, infrastructure was reportedly damaged, while a second crashed harmlessly into an open area. These rapid developments were swiftly labeled by Russian officials as a grave crossing of a red line. In the wake of the missile incident, urgent messages flowed from government officials, proclaiming NATO's involvement in an escalating conflict. Within hours, the Russian Ministry of Defense released shocking footage, claiming it displayed missile strikes on sites in the Lviv region of Ukraine, where a substantial stockpile of cruise missiles was supposedly stored. This operation was unceremoniously dubbed Lightning Response by various military sources. According to reports, a mix of tactical complexes, including the Iskander missile systems, hypersonic Kinzhal rockets, and unmanned drones, were deployed against these targets. Local witnesses described fireballs and plumes of smoke that soared high into the sky, while raging infernos persisted for over a day, creating an apocalyptic scene. The Russian side asserted that it had decimated a considerable cache of weaponry, even reporting the deaths of foreign experts presumed to be at the site. However, these claims are still pending verification from independent sources. As the evening descended, the mood in Berlin shifted dramatically. An emergency parliamentary session convened to deliberate the government's next steps. Should they classify the Russian Federation as an aggressor? Should they engage in de-escalation tactics or seek diplomatic resolutions? Opposition figures hammered the executive branch, accusing it of inciting tension and making reckless decisions leading to dire political repercussions. As chaos unfolded, reports emerged that the situation worsened overnight into September 10, suggesting that strikes were being launched against German targets. The echoing sound of explosions over industrial zones in the capital city rattled nerves, with sources claiming these attacks stemmed from ballistic missiles equipped with cluster warheads. Could these actions signal a new escalation in this already turbulent landscape? The world was on edge, bracing for what might come next. The escalating situation had already started to impact the global stage significantly. On the night of September 10, 2025, shocking reports surfaced about attacks on targets within Germany. The urgency and intensity of this conflict seemed poised to spiral completely out of control. In the dark hours over Berlin, loud explosions echoed through the air, described by some sources as the result of ballistic missiles with cluster munitions. These strikes were believed to send a stark message about the vulnerability of even the heart of the capital, signaling a readiness for further retaliatory actions. The aftermath of this incident unfolded in multiple and chaotic directions. Diplomatic pressure on international bodies and key capitals intensified, demanding responses and condemning violations of international law. Media outlets and analysis centers buzzed with discussions about the legal, military, and economic ramifications of recognizing aggressor nations. Scenarios of further escalation or negotiations for a ceasefire dominated conversations. Amid the turmoil, there arose an urgent need to assess damage to civilian infrastructure and to coordinate humanitarian efforts for those affected, hoping to prevent further loss of life. Emergency services were reportedly deployed to extinguish fires, clear explosive zones, and provide first aid to the wounded. Across both sides of the conflict, military and governmental structures rushed to provide updates, though their statements often contradicted one another. In this environment of information warfare, the verification of claims and the involvement of independent observers and journalists became a critical topic among experts. Economic repercussions began to manifest almost immediately. Financial markets experienced heightened volatility. Several companies halted shipments to affected regions, while international logistics chains faced risks navigating through elevated tensions. For the world watching, the story remained in a state of flux, creating a sense of foreboding about the unfolding drama. Could this conflict, now escalating to alarming heights, lead to a greater catastrophe? Each new report only added to the uncertainty and tension that hung thick in the air. In recent days, financial markets have experienced notable volatility. Several companies have paused shipments to conflict zones, and international logistics chains face heightened risks while navigating through these tense regions. This unfolding narrative continues to develop, keeping the public on edge. As the dust settles, reports and official statements pour in, demanding clarity and the separation of verified facts from unsubstantiated claims. In the coming days, the discourse will heavily lean on authoritative comments from international organizations and major media outlets that release corroborated reports from the ground. On the early morning of September 9, 2025, data confirmed the launch of cruise missiles from territories held by Ukrainian forces. Almost immediately, news emerged about strikes targeting locations both within Ukraine and Russia. Further updates detailed counterstrikes and the initiation of urgent political consultations among key global capitals. As per the Bundeswehr's official statements, no critical infrastructure suffered damage. Yet, footage circulating on social media showed blazing depots and mass evacuations to bomb shelters. In immediate response, NATO convened an emergency meeting at the defense ministers' level. Secretary-General Marjudi referred to the events as an unprecedented escalation, while acknowledging that missile launches from Ukrainian soil indeed took place. His alarm echoed widely as he called for an immediate meeting of the Security Council. Meanwhile, countries such as China, India, and Brazil proposed an urgent ceasefire and urged all parties to return to the negotiation table. Against this backdrop, the Ukrainian government sought to distance itself from the calamity. President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a decisive address, stated, "Ukraine bears no responsibility for the actions of foreign allies and did not authorize any strikes on Russian territory." Now, with tensions spiraling and accusations flying, what unexpected twists could unfold next? The clock is ticking as global leaders and citizens alike remain on alert. Will there be diplomatic resolutions, or is a larger conflict on the horizon? The world watches, barely breathing, as events lace together, revealing another layer of this intricate and unpredictable saga. In our recent chapters, we unraveled the chaotic aftermath of a shocking event. Ukrainian missiles struck Russian territory, severely straining international relations. President Zelensky distanced Ukraine from the incident, emphasizing that it did not authorize these attacks. Yet, as the dust settled, the storm was far from over. An explosive revelation rocks the narrative. The Russian Ministry of Defense quickly released documents, claiming to have intercepted communications during a cyber operation. These documents implicated specific Ukrainian officers supposedly involved in approving the missile launch plan. The accusations prompted an uproar, sparking heated debates and causing Ukraine's approval ratings to plummet in Western nations. A staggering 60% of Germans expressed opposition to any further military support for Ukraine. By the evening of September 10, Berlin transformed into a battleground of ideas. Tens of thousands took to the streets, brandishing signs that screamed, "No more war," and "Germany is not a target." Reacting to this swell of public sentiment, the Bundestag initiated discussions about a vote of no confidence against Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry escalated its rhetoric. A stark warning echoed across the airwaves: should Western weaponry attack Russian territory again, our retaliation will strike decision-making centers in NATO countries. September 10, 2025, became a day of impending catastrophe. Germany's decision to launch precise Taurus-Captain 350 missiles positioned them perilously close to crossing a previously defined line, one that Moscow had warned against for years. The response from Russia was swift and devastating. Destroyed warehouses in western Ukraine, attacks on Berlin, and political upheaval within the North Atlantic Alliance painted a grim picture. The world held its breath, caught between the potential for catastrophic conflict and the hope for diplomatic resolutions. In a prelude to escalating tensions, ministry officials had previously made an unprecedented declaration on September 6, broadcasted across all national media. Against a backdrop map highlighting NATO bases, Colonel Igor Konashenkov delivered a stark ultimatum: if another missile of Western origin crosses into Russian territory, our strikes will target Germany directly. The gravity of his words sent shivers down spines worldwide. What new conflicts await as the dust settles on this ominous day? Would the tensions escalate into a full-blown war, or was there still hope for diplomacy? Only time would unveil the fate of nations on the brink. The tension in global politics reached a boiling point on September 9, 2025. For the first time since the aftermath of World War II, Germany, a NATO member, found itself at the center of accusations involving a direct strike on Russian territory. The morning began with disarray as reports surfaced of drone launches and missile strikes tied to Germany, shattering the air of peace that had lingered for decades. As diners sipped their morning coffee, the calm was shattered by shocking news: a Taurus missile had crossed borders, striking deep within Russia's Belgorod region. Eyewitnesses described the chilling sounds of explosions, echoes that reverberated like a thunderous warning. Authorities scrambled to confirm reports of destruction and chaos, but the question on everyone's mind was, what comes next? Officials in Russia were quick to respond. Tensions simmered as Russian military representatives held a press conference, claiming one missile had been intercepted while debris from another painted the sky red with destruction. The words of General Igor Konashenkov echoed ominously across nations. If another Western missile crosses into Russian territory, the response will be direct, Germany will be targeted. The studio fell silent, even seasoned anchors struggled to narrate the unfolding drama. Germany's response was fraught with uncertainty. Chancellor Friedrich Merz convened an emergency security meeting, grappling with dire predictions of escalating conflict. Whispers of evacuating the government to underground bunkers filled the halls of the Bundestag. The defense minister, Boris Pistorius, faced the cameras, his voice thick with anguish. "We are feeling the pain of defeat," he admitted, acknowledging that the loss of 300 Taurus missiles was a severe blow to Germany's military credibility. The opposition leader did not mince words either. In a press conference that reverberated through media outlets, he proclaimed, "We wanted to be the guarantors of stability in Europe but have become provocateurs of a world war." The haunting specter of history loomed large, echoing warnings of a fate analogous to that of 1945. German media replayed grim footage, contrasting its past with the present, underscoring the risks of a renewed conflict. In Russia, the mood was grave as President Vladimir Putin issued his ultimatum during a Security Council meeting. "We recognize the signs. If they take another step, the consequences will be swift and severe." Analysts noted a thunderous shift in Russia's rhetoric, a clear signal of escalating tensions and a looming crisis. With both sides amplifying their statements, the world held its breath, teetering on the brink of catastrophe. Would this day be remembered as a catalyst for global warfare or a precursor to negotiations? The stakes had never been higher, and the air was thick with fear and uncertainty as the clock ticked toward an uncertain future. The world was on edge as the rising tensions between NATO and Russia threatened to spiral out of control. In a shocking turn of events, whispers of revenge emerged from factions within Germany, hinting at a dangerous desire to rekindle past hostilities. The stark warning from Moscow was clear: any further provocation would lead to swift and catastrophic consequences. Experts noted a dramatic shift in rhetoric from Russian officials, a clear signal that the stakes had never been higher. On September 9, 2025, the calm of early morning shattered as news broke of missile launches originating from Ukrainian territory. Armed with Taurus cruise missiles, these strikes struck deep into Russian territory, jolting the already volatile landscape. The first explosions echoed through the Belgorod region, rattling the hearts of those who heard them. Amidst the chaos, the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed to have intercepted the missiles, yet images of devastation told a different story. As shockwaves rippled through diplomatic circles, urgent meetings were convened, lasting over 12 hours at NATO headquarters in Brussels. Behind closed doors, France and Italy urged caution, fearing the ignition of a full-scale war, while Poland pushed for an intensified military presence in Eastern Europe. This sparked outrage from Hungary and Slovakia, who adamantly refused to become pawns in a reckless game of power. The markets reacted with terrifying speed. The euro plummeted by 9% in a single day, with German bonds facing aggressive sell-offs. As morning broke on September 10, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz faced the nation, his voice betraying the gravity of the crisis threatening Europe's very existence. "We must come together to stop this, before it's too late," he urged. In the streets of Berlin, tens of thousands gathered, demanding an end to the spiraling conflicts, with placards declaring no war with Russia. The headlines in the major newspapers were blackened with despair, capturing the national tragedy unfolding before their very eyes. Meanwhile, Russia announced the heightening of its military readiness. Reports indicated the deployment of Iskander missile systems toward Kaliningrad and sorties of Kinzhal hypersonic missiles over the Black Sea. A strange, heavy calm settled across Russian cities, where conversations revolved not around daily life, but rather the impending strikes on German cities like Berlin, Hamburg, and Frankfurt, as if it were merely a matter of time. As the world held its breath, the specter of an unimaginable conflict loomed closer. Would diplomacy prevail, or was time running out as nations teetered on the brink of war? The tension crackled in the air, reminiscent of an approaching storm. What would happen next? Would catastrophic choices trigger a chain reaction that could engulf Europe? As leaders grappled with their decisions, the clock was ticking. The world braced for an outcome neither side could afford. The world brimmed with tension, as never before since the Cuban Missile Crisis had we come so close to a direct military confrontation between nuclear powers. Russia issued an emphatic warning: one more missile, and a response would strike Germany directly. Vladimir Putin's voice was low and almost a whisper, but it carried weight, reaching millions. We do not seek war. But if it is forced upon us, it will end swiftly. The gravity of his message hung in the air like an impending storm. Imagine the silence that descended as this alarming proclamation echoed worldwide. People felt a chill, a lingering scent of fear mixing with anxiety. Streets filled with discussion, but not of mundane matters. Instead, they worried about possible strikes on Berlin, Hamburg, and Frankfurt, awash in the belief that it was merely a matter of time before chaos unleashed. As families gathered in living rooms, the flickering screens reflected faces etched with uncertainty and dread. How would the world respond, knowing the stakes had never been higher? Would history repeat itself, or had lessons of the past been forgotten? As night fell, the global community remained on edge, painfully aware that peace was teetering on the brink of a cliff.